Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for coming out this afternoon and braving the rain and all the health scares that are out there. We are so pleased. First of all, I'm Upsara de Quinzio, and it is my distinct pleasure and honor to have organized Ron Nagle Handsome Drifter with Ron Nagle. We're pleased that this exhibition will be on view through August, so if you haven't seen it yet, we hope you'll have a chance. And we're delighted to have Ron Nagle and Don Ed Hardy here with us today in conversation. They go way back, and they share a long history together and many overlapping interests, which I am sure we will hear a lot more about. But in particular, they have a love and affinity for Japanese aesthetics. And before I bring them out and introduce them, I just want to take one brief moment to thank the sponsors for the exhibition. Without them, it would have not been possible. And those are the Andy Warhol Foundation for Visual Arts, Matthew Marks Gallery, Nyan McAvoy and Leslie Berryman, Joachim and Nancy Bechtel, Chara Schreier and Gordon Freund, Robin Wright and Ian Reeves, and Joan Roebuck, with additional support by Carly Email and Rich Silverstein, Alexander Bowes and Stephen Williamson, Jeffrey Spahn Gallery, the LLWW Foundation, and Dorothy Sachs. So thanks to all of our wonderful sponsors. So Don Ed Hardy is an American tattoo artist raised in Southern California. Hardy is known for his tattoo work and his eponymous apparel and accessories brand, Ed Hardy. He moved to San Francisco in 1963 to attend the San Francisco Art Institute, and in 1967 received a BFA degree in printmaking under the mentorship of Gordon Cook. He also studied with Joan Brown, Manuel Neri, and other Bay Area artists, and then also became close friends with Ron Nagle. Hardy has written and published over 40 titles under the Hardy Marks imprint and curated numerous exhibitions. He retired from tattooing in 2006, but still owns the shop Tattoo City in San Francisco's North Beach, which opened in 1974. He now focuses on painting and printmaking, exhibiting his works internationally over the past 30 years and co-curating numerous exhibitions. In 2019, the De Young Museum presented a comprehensive retrospective of his career. Ron Nagle has made stunning, entirely unique small sculptures since the 1950s, producing a body of work that is as original as it is inventive. A student of Peter Voulkos, Nagle participated in an important dialogue with ceramic artists like Ken Price and Jim Melchert, and only recently has his work gained a wider audience. Nagle began his career making funky, rough cups and vessels out of earthenware, and by the early 1960s was using low-fire slip casting techniques, making smoother surfaces and bringing into play the luminous colors that would become his calling card. Later, he also began gluing elements together, muddying the purity of ceramics and allowing more play and flexibility with form. This exhibition marks his first survey in the Bay Area in over 25 years. Please join me in welcoming Ron Nagle and Don Ed Hardy.
Well, this is a great honor to
Me
be
too.
on stage with
And thank you, Upsara, for that
the king
fabulous.
here. And and it's really, and I meant to tell her how spectacular the catalog is. I've been poring over it for the last couple of weeks since Francesca and I were able to get over and see the show, and it's really it's a huge honor to be here with Ron, who's been one of my primary mentors and partners in crime on bad humor and all kinds of projects and general aesthetic outlook. But it's really it's fantastic to see the show. Unfortunately, Francesca and I weren't here for the opening, but we were completely knocked out when we did get over here, and the installation's great, and of course the work is just defies description of any kind, and the catalog's fantastic. Everything's great. And Ron's been a big, as I mentioned, I came up to the Art Institute in '63, and Ron was one of the first people I met. I mucked around a little bit with a little bit of clay with my manual nary and realized it was not my medium at all. But I got to know Ron some then, and he terrified everybody with the intensity of his of who he is, and he's still, he's carried, age hasn't dulled that, and
Oh,
but it was,
come on, it's taken the edge off a little bit.
it is, yes, you've refined it, you've refined the barbs and arrows, but the thing that we shared, and then we became really close friends over these many decades, and I think that we both share in a way that we're, to phrase an old famous movie, we're kind of like rebels without applause. And we kind of both were working in these mediums that were, frowned upon or dismissed or whatever, not seen as polite ways to make art.
Marginalized.
Marginalized, that's right. Yeah, we're out in the fringes, out in where the thin air is. So it's been fantastic, again, to see Ron's development. The work was phenomenal to begin with, and somehow some of my closest buddies were people working in clay, mainly Richard Shaw. I had the great opportunity and honor to actually meet Altoon when I was very young. Went to La Cienega to a show he was installing. I told Ron this the other day, and he came down off his ladder, and my buddy and I were there, and we were just young art students. We were like 18 or something, and he introduced himself, and it was just like, my God, this guy, he's one of the gods of art, and he comes down and he's a regular person, and it meant a lot to us, just the whole absence of pretense and attitude and bullshit that went with so much stuff involved in the fine arts community was really, just ignored by the people that were really doing the real work. And I think it was great that Ron decided today to do, stress this, the qualities about the work that are probably maybe invisible to a lot of people, but certainly fuel a lot of the fury that makes it, of the kind of classical Japanese aesthetics that are very, very hard to articulate, basically under the theme of Wabi-sabi, of a way of looking at the world and looking at art and looking at doing things. And so that's what Ron's choice to put together here, and I think it'll help expand people's awareness of what really goes on with his pieces. It's impossible to categorize what he does, impossible to paraphrase it. It's just what it is. But this, I think, gives you a little entryway into some of it. So that's
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's working. Well, thank you, Don, and thank all of you for coming out and risking whatever you're risking. And it's become you want that or?
No
I saw
touchy.
these guys yesterday I've become very politicized for reasons that most of you will understand. When I saw these two guys get off Air Force One and
Yeah.
do this, one guy in a like full general uniform, and it's the hippest thing I've seen happen in this administration. Anyway, Wabi-sabi. First of all, there's a disclaimer or caveat or whatever you want to say, is that I am not an expert, nor is anybody really. I mean, most Japanese people rarely even use the term, and it's one of those undefinable kinds of experiences, I guess you'd say, maybe a feeling, maybe an attitude, but it's all intangible in a sense. And it applies to a variety of things. And if you really get it, I guess, or if it gets you, it'll apply to your life. It hasn't reached me on that level yet. In fact, Scott Matthews, who's here, is my good buddy and songwriting partner. I wrote down some of the names of the songs that I have, and they're all about the guy that I'd like to be, but I'm not. And let me see here. This is the anti-sabi here. Maybe Okay, some of these I stole from a higher power. One day at a time, don't let the dream die. Wake up crying, beware of love, who you gonna tell, pearls of wisdom, it's cool. That's my favorite. That's really the guy I'd like to be, but I'm not. Do I have to like it? Be here now. And I'm none of those things. And what can I tell you? When people used to ask what my philosophy was or whatever, when I was teaching at the Art Institute, I remember this woman came up to me from about 20 feet away, and she's doing this. And I'm going, what are you doing? She says, I'm measuring your aura. She said, and it's not good. Not aligned properly. Okay, well, so I began referring to myself as a sedated hysteric. It was the 70s, and I needed a lot of sedation and practiced it with friends of mine. So anyway, there was a nice review the other day, if you can get it. It was in, I don't know if it's online or in Freeze magazine. Is Fanny Singer here today? No. Okay, well, she said Nagle represents something of San Francisco that I hope never meets extinction, an attitude, part rebuke of part bald indifference. Bald, B-A-L-D. I didn't know how to feel about that. It's part bald. It's almost all bald. So, in preparation for this event today, I got 3 books and started reading about Wabi-sabi, and I'm going to just go through quickly. We kind of, consolidated a lot of this stuff, but let's start from the top. I think that Don and I realized somewhere along the line in the process of making things, and I would include music as well as art, as certain things that you realize you're doing and you didn't even know you were wabi or sabi, and those 2 words are whatever. So I'm going to just go through these very quickly. Very few can articulate this feeling, no language being moved. Oh, it's about being moved. Subtleties of mood, vagueness, and the logic of the heart, but not so for explaining things in a rational way. The quote for that is, throughout history, a rational understanding of wabi-sabi has been intentionally thwarted. And this I dedicate to all those in academia who don't understand. Those who don't say, those say don't know. Those who know don't say. Either you get it or you don't. And that applies to any number of things. It can apply to everything. One person's being moved by and having the wabi-sabi experience might seem like junk to somebody else. So anyway, missing or indefinable knowledge is simply another aspect of wabi-sabi's inherent incompleteness. To fully explain the concept might, in fact, diminish it. Sometimes it's been referred to as a celebration of art that is incomplete. Over the intervening centuries, the meaning of wabi-sabi and sorry have crossed over so much that the line separating them is very blurry indeed. When Japanese say wabi, they also mean sabi, and vice versa. Acceptance of the inevitable, appreciation of the cosmic order, moral precepts, get rid of all the unnecessary, and restraint. This leads me to a story which Kenny Price once told me. He was in Japan with like a very great potter, ceramic artist, and they were watching Hamada, who a lot of people think represent great Japanese ceramics. I am not one of those people. I hate his work. I think it's arthritic. But this guy goes over to Kenny and goes, he's watching the guy, watching Hamada work, and goes, too much touching. So you got to know when to get out, you know? It's very difficult because you think, well, if you just did this one thing, it would be a better piece or a better song or whatever. The people that I've grown to love and hopefully understand on a wabi-sabi level are people who boiled it down till before they die. It's just, I'm thinking of Morandi in particular. I'm thinking of Philip Guston. One bowl of cherries, thank you very much. Unbelievable. Same thing with Morandi. One table, one wall, one bottle, one shadow. That's it. And it's, so without trying, you can't try to make that happen. You just have to recognize when it does happen. So these are moral precepts. It says, get rid of all that is unnecessary restraint. Focus on the intrinsic and ignore material hierarchy as such. This is something that Don and I talk about a lot, and it certainly would be applicable to his former life as a tattoo artist and mine as a, what do we call you, a ceramicist, a potter, the ceramic artist? Are you being truthful to your materials? I grew up with this shit. I mean, this is when art professors wore a smock like the guy at the delicatessen with the gray, you know, like this. And I almost wore a special garment today. I have when I got an honorary PhD from the Art Institute, well, I had very mixed experiences with when I was teaching there. Part of it my fault, of course. I got an honorary PhD, and my studio manager, Whitney, gave me a physician's coat. And doctors don't wear those anymore. But it said Ron Nagle, PhD, and then it had a broken heart on it, and it said Fendus International, which is the fictitious name of my company. And I was going to wear it today. And then I looked at it, and had red paint all over. It looked like blood. I said, I don't think that's going to go over too well. So I just went street cash, normcore. Humility, material qualities, the suggestion of the natural process, irregular, intimate, unpretentious, earthy, murky. A lot of people, when they talk about wabi-sabi, think it's all funky and cracked, and I mean that's one part of it. But there can be very elegant work, and I'll refer to some of those qualities or pieces that have that are not grungy, if you want to call it that. Hamada and Leach were I mentioned Hamada. Bernard Leach was an English guy who thought he discovered the real meaning of Japanese ceramics and brought it to the Western world. Unfortunately, from my perspective, they were both horrible artists, but they did introduce the Western world to a new way of thinking about aesthetics. Greatness, quotation marks, exists in the inconspicuous and overlooked details. Wabi-sabi represents an exact opposite of the Western ideal of great beauty as something spectacular, monumental, and enduring. So if you're doing that, cross that off your list. There's exceptions to this now. Don't get me wrong. I think Richard Serra is great, and he's all of those things. But there's some wabi-sabi in there. Beauty is thus an altered state of consciousness, an extraordinary moment of poetry and grace. Have you reached that state yet?
No, I'm waiting. I've got a ticket.
Yeah, you can't make it, you can't force it to happen. I think the more you sit down and the more time you put in and the more you're willing to to have the capacity to recognize it when it happens. I think in some ways, in music, people would call it a groove, where everybody's feeling the same thing, but you can't explain it. This is how you get in the pocket, as they say on The Voice, which I have to admit I watch it periodically. I learn something once in a while, and they have an occasional good singer too. Or in the studio, people call it the zone. It's just where you leave and you're still working. These transcendent feelings, acceptance and inevitable. An anecdote. A story of Ryaku's entrance exam before being admitted as a student to the famous tea master Takeno-ju. Ryuko was asked to clean Ju's leaf-strewn garden. First, he raked it until the grounds were spotless. Then, in a gesture pregnant with wabi-sabi overtones, he shook the tree trunk, causing a few leaves to fall. So if you're painting somebody's house and they say you missed a spot, you say that's on purpose. Wabi inspirations, minimum use of materials for maximum results. Humble and unassuming. And there's a term which I hadn't heard before called ma, defining the space surrounding the object, space between, that creates a dynamic tension to heighten our appreciation of the composition. This hit me very hard because I don't know if anybody has read the review of my show by the local art critic. To this day, I don't understand it. Did I see a thumbs down out there? I was out of focus here. What the fuck was he talking about? Did he like the work? He says ceramics are supposed to be set up in a certain way, and he didn't enjoy like it. This whole thing came about, and this is one of those things where something that you expect is going to go wrong. In his case, it did. In my case, it turned completely around because we had to make this installation to accommodate ADA regulations, and I was going, oh man, what are we going to do? You know, da 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 da. And at the end, everybody loved it. It was an inadvertent blessing because of the designer, Eve, and my dealer in New York and so forth. But in terms of, somebody said, oh, no, I think that was a positive review. He talked very little about the work. He talked about why are they in glass boxes. Well, that's pretty fucking easy. So somebody won't steal them. He didn't bring that part up or the ADA regulation. It is not a style, if this is back to Meyer. I go off on tangents I call sidebars, but you'll have to forgive me. It's parenthetical thinking, I can't help it. It is not a style, a fashion, or a design trend. Neither is it an idea that is likely to be imitated or replicated. Refined simplicity, a search for the sublime, a rising above the mundane. It is a remarkable exercise in restraint. Restraint's really hard for me. I try to have a talk with myself if I'm starting to go overboard, and I have a penchant for that. But it's something to remember. I'll leave it at that. Wa and wabi are principles where everything is pared down to the essential. I'm somebody who hates virtuosity. There are some people who think I'm a virtuoso. I'm not. I just put in my 10,000, well, it's 110,000 hours, and if not more. And I love what I do. And that's the most important thing. And I love what I do because I saw somebody else do it better. So your bar is raised. So there's a lot of people dead and alive who I say, man, someday I'm going to make something that's that good. I never have been satisfied. I mean, I know there's good ones and maybe some that are not whatever, but Anyway, and to recognize that size is only an illusion. Now, we could make a lot of jokes about size or the size of someone's hand in authority or, no, well, forget it. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is a source of all true and all science. Albert Einstein. So he got it. Enigma and ambiguity also fulfill a purpose. I would say if there was something that I consciously, on some level, try to attain without pushing too much, it is a sense of ambiguity. That comes in with how I title work, and how and the elements that I put together that are seemingly sometimes incongruous for people. I gave a talk at the Art Institute one time, and this kid in the audience says, "I don't get it. I don't know what those titles have to do with anything." So I took him for a long ride. Fucked his mind up pretty good, I think. I think there's a few out there who were at that talk. After the lecture was over, which I considered my last official lecture and my best, he comes up to me and says, "Someday you're going to know my name." Oh, is it Charles Manson or Ted Bundy? What is it? But I felt threatened, and I hope I do know your name. Music to create harmony must investigate discord. Plutarch, 46 to 120 AD. Terms, hade, meaning showy, gaudy, liberal. Iki, chic, stylish, worldly, and sophisticated, effortlessly cool. Shibui, austere, subdued, subtle, and restrained. I named a piece, I wanted to get two languages in one piece, so I did a piece called Mui Shibui. You figure out the source. Jimmy, sober, conservative, unobtrusive, excuse me. Wabi-sabi is a feeling, and it is intangible. Okay, well, that's that. Now, Don, would you care to share?
Well, I thought it was great that you took this as a topic, and I think it is, it's one of the underlying kind of themes or energy that fuels Japanese aesthetics, and as we know, and could talk about endlessly, is you can't categorize it. You can't really talk about it. It's just like when you're working in some kind of medium, you can, I love stuff from when I was a kid, the Westerns, the old things. It's one of my favorite lines is "Talk's cheap. I want action," and it's just, you can discuss this, you can get to, analytical, intellectual about a lot of these things, which is what drove me from, a lot of you probably knows, from a career track to go to Yale and go to graduate school with a fellowship. And I decided I'm going to be a tattooer because it was, I think, a particular turning point in art history where conceptual art ruled the field. And I just wanted to make prints and get good, impressions of the plates I worked on. And, I have a very simple, old-fashioned kind of approach to art. But the things that you can't define this, and I think that the usefulness of accepting this, or at least trying to pay attention to it, is it can make your whole life better. It's a way to really cope with being alive and accepting certain things and just rolling with the punches and knowing when to duck under the next wave. And, it's really the kinds of things that I think are crucial and invaluable for us as a species that Asian art taps into, is this kind of way to really recognize and appreciate the situation that we're in, that we're all going to die. The work we're going to make is really not going to be. Ron, I was going to break this to you over in the room before we came in. It's just these kinds of qualities are just ways to try to articulate the kinds of feelings that force us really to make these things, that when we're dealt the hand of being able to kind of muck around with some kind of a medium and see what we can get with it, it's fantastic to be able to get into that other space where there's no intention, there's no rule book, there's no anything. You're just in the zone. You're doing the work, and it's fantastic to be able to. I'm so grateful that I've had a very, very fortunate life to, because I was encouraged to draw from when I was a tiny kid by my mom. I still have a lot of drawings I did when I was 3, and it's the only thing I was ever good at, and it worked. But these things of following instinct that you have with whatever medium you're in, and not trying to work to an agenda, is, I think, really, really crucial to trying to come out with something that's going to transmit some kind of the joy that we find in creating these things. And Ron, of course, has established a field that is, you can't describe it. You can't. It's just so far beyond anything else that anyone else was doing. And granted, he came up through being exposed to people like Pete Volkas and Ken Price and some of these other people working in the largely ignored and despised medium of, ceramics or,
On both sides, both the fine arts world and the craft world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What's
yeah.
so weird is, I don't mean to interrupt.
No, but that's it. Go ahead.
Well, what's really weird is all of a sudden ceramics started peaking, and everybody from Gagosian on down or up, depending on how you look at it, is doing ceramic shows now, or, quote, craft-oriented shows. There's a craft-oriented show at the Whitney right now with some exotic name to justify its being there, I think. But we were getting it from both sides because the traditional potter said, "You are destroying form." And then you'd say, "No, we are creating new form." And then the fine arts people, I remember Richard Shaw told me, he was talking to Frank Stella at a Guggenheim dinner or something. He said, "If you're working in clay, you're never going to get one of these, Guggenheim." Well, fuck you, I got one.
Yeah.
So it's like all of a sudden it became the hot thing to do, and for those of us who had been doing it for a really long time, it was kind of shocking. Then I thought it was going to level off, as most art movements do, or dive. And now it's gone back up again. It's like the stock market. It's like everybody's got a ceramic show. And most of it's not too good, really. But they couldn't have gotten in for one reason or another 5 years ago, 10 years ago. These are things I spend my time wondering about. But not all my time. I spend most of my time thinking about working on stuff. And being old, that's another one. Anyway.
But it's been really interesting to see how things have developed with what people figure is real art and what is, important for people to look at and think about. And again, getting back to Ron's personal work, which is unclassifiable because he's completely he's gone into realms that you can't say, well, yeah, this is sort of like this, or this was inspired by this. It just crosses over all these different boundaries and avenues of opportunity. And it's been phenomenal to watch this over the decades, the many decades that we've known each other, and see what he's coming up with next. And I'm sure, essentially surprising himself, because I know when the things really come through and you get the clear channel. One of my favorite, we're both big fans of Philip Guston. We share a lot of favorite art heroes that have inspired us.
He's the only guy I talk to art with about art.
Yeah, we try not to. We
have a gentleman's dinner and
yeah.
say, "Did you see that shit, man?" Or, on the other hand, wow, I just saw this unbelievable Morandi show, or whatever the case is. I mean, we're both enthusiasts. I think to be good at anything, you've got to be a fan first. Which fan is short for fanatic.
That's right.
And we are fanatics about art. I don't except when I was teaching, I would talk to students a lot about stuff. but half the studio visits, we'd talk about a record we liked or something like that. It wasn't always about, well, if you just change that to red, you're going to have something sunny. Anyway,
Yeah, it's interesting to see again what like the Guston thing. Where I love that thing is there's a great book which many of you probably know about. I think it's called Night Studio by Philip Guston's
I
daughter,
read it.
and she talks in there, and he painted at night, and they talk, and I love that thing where he talked about he would creep out to the studio in the morning, and open the door, because when you're in that zone, you're in the trance. You're not, if you're working successfully, really, and you can't force it, but you go away, and you're channeling something else, without being hippy-dippy about it, but you're really trying to reach some kind of state of expression that can't be quantified or can't be articulated, really. And Guston would talk about going out there in the morning and opening the door and going, oh my God, I did that? Like, we're thinking, where did that come from? And I feel the
That's the
same way.
greatest feeling is when you come back. Could be overnight or it could be 3 months later. Just put it aside.
Yeah.
I would say if there was a goal, I'd like to make stuff like somebody else made it. And I had
Absolutely.
nothing to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to get that. You have to get away from any kind of intent or ego or, this one will blow their socks away at the biennial.
Yeah,
all that crap,
you have to be able to pick it up when it's happening. You have to be able to recognize something's going on, and just as Kenny Price always said, just let the work tell you what to do. The theory comes later,
Yeah.
if at all.
Yeah.
So on that profound statement,
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, we could blab a long time about this.
it's like for some reason, stuff like we're talking about now, which is really, it's not that heady. It's just about how things feel and things that are elusive. People, nobody has a problem with it, talking about things like this in a different way, maybe more street when it comes to music. You hear something on the radio. If I hear something on the radio that really knocks me out, which is pretty rare, but nonetheless, I'll pull over and I'll point at the radio. I don't know why I'm pointing at the radio. Say, God damn it, man. That's really cool. Or call up Scott and tell him, hey, did you hear such and such? That kind of, it doesn't require a PhD to get that. And it doesn't require a PhD or somebody that's thinking too much left brain analysis to be responsive to something that really moves them visually or anything. I see stuff on the street and I'll take a picture of it with my book's got it. It's got, splats of whatever on the street or a tree thing, and then over here's a building, and then over here's something somebody said. I don't know. I just try to captivate it and then put them together in a way that doesn't really make logical sense.
Well, that was great about the catalog, I thought, too. I love the fact that there was a whole section of just this stuff, seized your attention, and it's really
right.
No category,
For
no
somebody
intent.
else, maybe it wouldn't, but
But it goes a long way to. It shows off what the kinds of things that light you up, and the whole thing is trying to. We're fortunate to be able to function, or to be cursed with the obsession to making this stuff that we just want to make it. We just want to see. We just want to see what comes out, and it's a wonderful thing to be born with that and have people that help us along to develop it and inspire us and put up with it. And
yeah, the enemy of all this is fear. I'd go for periods. I probably would have done a lot better, quote, career-wise if I hadn't been afraid that I was going to screw up. I go for a long time, years sometimes. It's like, oh, yeah, that's not as good as so-and-so. Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not as good as Vermeer. Fuck it, give it up.
yeah, you want to aim high.
I'd sure like to make a record like Phil Spector, but I don't think I can do it.
Yeah.
or whatever, you know. I mean, you know, so I set my bar high, and now I'm glad I did. But if you don't handle it or look at it with the right kind of perspective, you're going to sit there and do nothing except drink. And I did a lot of that.
Yeah, right. You graduated. I'm glad you mentioned Spector, because one of my favorite quotes was that Phil Spector thing, who came into, I'm sure you all, most of you know, most of you are old enough to know how important Phil Spector was and how he changed things with his wall of sound. And I love that quote of his one time. He said, I'm just trying to make little symphonies for the kids, to take these things that were disposable pop music things with, very, easy to understand emotions, but to pump them up to the grandeur and pomposity of these great orchestral things. And
That was Jack Nietzsche that did that.
Nietzsche did it, yeah, right. Got the sound there. But that's the thing, is you take these things that are humble or unrecognized or basically disdained, well, that's not high culture, that's not fine art, this is pottery, or these are tattoos, they're going to go away. Yeah, that's the whole point, It's just
They didn't go away if you didn't.
no, they didn't go away. But the one guarantee
all
you
those
have with
tramp
everyone.
stamps on somebody's ass. You're responsible for that.
No, I know. But the guarantee you do have is that it erases any kind of pomposity about, I wonder if this will be in the Louvre in 100 years. No, it's going to be in the ground, or it's going to be burned up.
A word I'm sick of is legacy.
Yeah.
If there's time for my legacy, I'll be dead. I don't give a shit. And I don't think my family does either, really. As long as it be here now, as a song and several other wise people say. I mean, I do it because I like doing it.
Yeah.
I love doing it.
Yeah, it's...
Making anything, a good idea. Everybody says, well, you're against conceptual art. No, there's nothing more beautiful than a good idea, but at first it's got to have other elements to draw you in. One of my favorite conceptual pieces is David Hammond's selling snowballs on the corner in Harlem. That's brilliant to me. So, but I'm an object guy, and I think it comes from making model airplanes when I was a kid with my father. I'm also got into this to be a rebel. I was a rebel without applause. My mother said, you have no talent. What do you want to do that for? Okay, fuck you, I'll show you. And I'm still fighting that battle. Sorry, Mom, wherever you might be. Well, it wouldn't be here. Actually, my parents are buried double-decker out in the Italian cemetery. You save a lot of money that way if you don't have to spread out.
That's right.
My father, after my mother died and he was shopping for a plot shopping, we call it, he was looking for a deal. And he got one. Oh, yeah, we can stack it. Now my sister, who's an incurable alcoholic, I had to sign papers that allowed her to sprinkle ashes with garnish, as if you remember the Phil Spector movie with Al Pacino, and he was talking about Bobby Kennedy. He said, oh, they just throw him in for garnish. My sister wants to garnish the grave with her ashes, and I had to give permission. How did I get to that? I don't know.
It all links up somewhere.
Yeah. Is it time for Q&A?
That's it. Good.
Okay.
Yeah, we've talked.
Mike is out there?
There's a hand over here.
Okay, Mike.
I'll play Mike for a second. There's plenty of things we could talk about, but one of the things I wanted to focus on was early on is this distinction between LA and San Francisco, or between the Art Institute, things down there. So I wanted to hear some of your favorite stories, or what comes to mind at this point about the rivalry between San Francisco and LA, and why San Francisco is so much better than LA.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about. First of all, we can blow it up a little bit more. During that period, which was mid to 60s, or 50s, I'm sorry, there was a great deal of rivalry and contempt about East East Coast, West Coast. I'm not talking about the rap wars. I'm talking about, although it wouldn't have been a bad thing, I think, if a few people out here got offed by, I'll say Franz Klein takes a shot at, who don't I like? No. But somewhere along the line, through Volcus, I think, I started to find out about what was happening, and as did Don. He was from Southern California. I've always been from here. What was happening at the Ferris Gallery? That was the core of what represents Los Angeles art. So every good thing that I ever saw that affected me, in conjunction with my crazy obsession about hot rods and working small, I think because whatever. There was this back and forth. There were some conduit. Well, first of all, let me say that I used to take what I called pilgrimages to LA with a friend of mine, Ed Burrell, who's just recently been recognized. He's got a book. Anyway, and I had a 51 Chevy panel truck, and we used to get in there and drive down to LA and see whatever was happening. And I did see shows, and I did get to go to like Bankston's studio or Kenny's studio, Larry Bell, Altoon. And one of the things that everybody had was a storefront studio, and then you'd live in the back. And I thought, man, that's really cool. And I finally found one, which Richard Shaw had and Richard Van Buren, and I finally got it on 19th Street in the Castro. But anyway, you walk into everybody's studio and it'd be covered, the work would be covered with a sheet. And I asked Ed, I said, what are they doing? He said, oh, they don't want anybody stealing their ideas. Well, the truth be known is a lot of times there was nothing under the sheet, but you had to fake it. But my sensibility and stuff that's related to what became later known as the finish fetish or the fetish finish, depending on how you look at it, definitely came from LA. That's where I saw my first Morandi drawing show. That's where I first met Walter Hopps and Irving Blum, who ran the gallery. And I thought that was where it was at, because I couldn't relate to Bay Area art, with a few exceptions, which I won't go into, because there's local heroes, and I'm not here to piss on anybody. I just found that kind of work more appealing. And there was also this kind of East-West thing in a global sense, where people like Robert Irwin were making paintings called Black Raku, and if you were in his class, you had the front of the painting had to look great, and the back had to be perfect. He would examine the stretcher bars for perfection. But then there was the motorcycle and the car culture, which was folded into it, which was a total Western thing. So this blend had a big influence on the way that I work and the way I thought about things. I don't know if I answered your question. What's that? Okay. I didn't put in my hearing aids today.
A racy anecdote would be good, of some kind, from one of those.
No, he wants some of the
studios.
private stash, Ron, I'm sorry. A racy anecdote, no.
A racy anecdote. You mean who's?
Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about that issue. You were talking about that finish fetish, or that issue of trying to bring in car finishes or motorcycle finishes into pieces compared to.
Ask me a question specifically about that, and I could probably answer it. I was painting cars and customizing cars when I was 16, and a friend of mine had a body shop, and we paint. I had a '48 Ford Coupe that had 40 coats of hand-rubbed lacquer, and that spilled over into my art eventually, where I was using China paints and layering them, except firing in between each, taking a chance with each firing that I'd crack the piece for over firing. I mean, I don't know, it's just a sort of a blend of things that had an influence on the way I think, the way I work. I don't know, you know.
Well, I think a lot of powerful culture comes, I mean, it comes up organically from the street, you know, it comes up from people's intent. Their intent isn't to go in and make high art or do something. They just do stuff because it moves them, and that definitely.
Yeah, I was moved by it. I mean, that's the only thing I could say. I mean, by that, I mean, I saw the other day, I was driving down South Venice, and I saw a guy had looked like maybe a 51 panel delivery truck, all cherried out, except the color was superb. It was like a chocolate brown, and then a little part of it was olive drab, and then a couple of what would be called shibui pinstripes that were absolutely perfect, and then a little, you know, red hiding behind the motor or something. I mean, better than any colorist I've ever fucking seen. Anybody in painting. I mean, I had to give him that.
That's right.
I mean, it was so good. I mean, maybe the best color work I've ever seen. And my dad used to take me to the Oakland Roadster show around my birthday, which was in February. And I'd see these guys. I mean, there was as much care and in every aspect, you know. It's a little bit contrary to the art of the imperfect, but somewhere in there. It's like when Japanese made sword makers, they'd make a perfect sword and then they'd take and put a little nick in it. It's a parallel to the leaf story. Or if a bowl got cracked, you just take the pieces and put them together with lacquer and gold leaf. And that shows the life of the piece. You don't throw it out. So it's a different way of thinking about things.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm hoping this question comes out right. So we're MFA students right now, and for you, working in a medium and working with the medium in a way that that ceramicists weren't accepting, and then also that fine artists weren't accepting necessarily at the time. Yes. You were also coming out at the same time as and through Volkus and Ken Price, and what was the balance for you between your internal drive and what you were doing in the studio and mentorship and community with the people that you were around as well? How did those factors play in for you being able to continue this work that was just so out of space and time in some ways?
Well, first of all, community was a very important part of it. I mean, Pete was at the core of it. The energy was unbelievable. It started in LA, and all of the people that were recognized as pioneers of contemporary ceramics, it started in LA at the Otis Art Institute or the County Art Institute, depending on, whatever. And Pete was fired because he would leave the windows open so all of his apostles or whatever would get to climb in at night and work all night long and then sneak out. And this guy, Millard Sheets, who was a half-ass architect, ran the school and fired him. He said, you can leave now and get paid, or you can finish off the semester. You take your pick. He said, fuck it, I'm out of here. And he had a job I'm pointing up here, I don't know where the direct, he had a job up the street at Berkeley and was hired with tenure. And that same kind of energy and core of people working together on stuff. I mean, I know Jim Melchert and I were working on low fire glazes and stuff. And just being around that energy and watching Pete work. He didn't teach. or explain anything. If anything, you go down to a studio and look at a magazine with a picture of a beautiful Japanese tea bowl. And I don't know what to say. The other thing that happened was that they had a great art library. So every month I would be literally sitting in front waiting for the mail person to come in and deliver like Art International or CMS or I don't know, whatever the art, it is, or all these art magazines. I had to find out what was going on in Europe. I mean, I was just, because that's the other thing about this town. It was very provincial. There weren't that many good shows that had come through. Then, I mean, it's different now, but it took a long time. I mean, the best show I saw, I think, at that time was American Painting or whatever, and it was all the abstract expressionists. Another thing, by the way, going back to this LA thing, I think there were people who were a conduit, like Jay DeFeo, who knew, who was tied with Walter Hopps, and so there was that kind of crossover. But that was about, not too many others. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry, I got off on a sidebar again.
I think you kind of answered it. It was just whether or not you have clearly some kind of internal drive that's keeping you going and telling you what's right in the studio, and whether that mentorship and community, like without that, if you think you'd have been able to continue or.
Well, yeah, I think it is. It continues more and more, I mean, what else am I going to do? I mean, I got to be doing something if we're not doing music, and then I got to do this, and it's a very weird position to be in right now because I became successful about 4 years ago, which started with the Venice Biennale, and they used to say, "Well, man, I'm big in Japan." They don't know jack shit about me in Japan, but I'm huge in Germany. All over Europe. I mean, all my shows were in Europe, and they loved it. I don't like traveling, so I send my studio manager, and she goes and supervises the installation and stuff. But it's somewhat overwhelming. Be careful what you wish for. It's lonely at the middle.
Ron, talk a little bit about your early years in the music business.
Well, let's see. Which part do you want to know? I'm going to let my partner. Well, early, okay. Okay, first of all, I'll just, this will sound like a brag sheet list. I played the first benefit for the San Francisco meme troupe, which David Felton actually sent me the poster from that. Do you have that poster, Joel? I don't know. They're celebrating this in New York somewhere, and here's that poster of me with hair and pretty good-looking guy, really. Anyway, and the rest of the band, and I think the Fugs played and everything, and it was in a warehouse down like on what would be called South the Market, upstairs in a loft, kind of a big space. And my band, The Mystery Trend, played the very first show that Bill Graham, who was part of the meme troupe at the time. The next step to that was playing at the first Fillmore concert. The Fillmore was basically a rhythm and blues. That's where if you wanted to go see James Brown or Sonny Boy or you name it, I mean, whatever, or doo-wop, or that's where you'd go. So we played the first couple of shows, and then psychedelia hit us, and we fucking hated it. We hated it, still hate it. And because we weren't into jamming. We were into, I mean, our favorite bands would be like the Lovin' Spoonful or the Beach Boys or the Kinks. I thought I turned this thing off. Well, anyway, and so we might have been pioneers or originate, the first band to play, but our popularity waned. To tell you how fucked up the aesthetics were, and I tell this story occasionally, we did this song called Keep Sleeping. I'm so sorry. I purposely turned this off. Did a song called Keep Sleeping. The guitar player was completely out of tune, put the capo on the wrong fret. The bass player couldn't play. The drummer was out of time. And then I had a clavinet where it had strings, and one of the strings broke. And when the string breaks, it lands on all the other strings. So you just got clatter. You can hit any chord you want, and it's just, like that. And we go, what are we going to do? And we didn't believe in stopping and starting. We said, okay, we'll just play through it. I mean, it was unbelievable, horrible. Although Discord, according to one of those guys I just read about, thought maybe it was okay. So this guy who put on the show with Bill Graham came up and he said, that song, you blew my mind. That was the heaviest thing I'd ever heard. You guys are fantastic. So we went through a long period of trying to figure out how to duplicate that. So those are the early days. Then in 1969, I did a solo album from Warner Brothers and met Jack Nietzsche, who was, as Don had mentioned, the arranger for all the Phil Spector records and had a hell of a lot to do with the way they sounded. And he produced that record. And then it was finally re-released, I don't know, about 3 years ago. Then 1972, 3, I started working on movies and learned a lot about recording. And then I met Scott, and we've been working together ever since. We did a record called The Do Rocks, and then other people started recording our material. And then we got fucked by a guy named Charles Koppelman. And because I sold the publishing to some songs that Barbra Streisand did. She had nothing to do with stealing our money, but this guy did. He said, "You've got to sell us the publishing, or she won't record them." So we did, because we were building a studio and we needed the money. He said, "Come on," and Koppelman goes, "You will always have bread. You will always have bread if you do this deal." Well, bread turned out to about 3 cents, 4 cents. Now the bread has disappeared. There is no bread. So, I mean, those are our, it's a pretty crooked business, really. Although we do, I still do music for the love of it. I'd love to see it get out there more. We're working on it. I never quit, but that's the early days.
So this may be a multi-layered question, but it mainly has.
I like a good layering.
Then we're in. I think what I'm mainly curious about has to do partly with influence. Mm-hmm. And then you had earlier spoke about getting over that fear of your own very specific point of view. And this question is, I think, for both of you, because I think you both have a very particular and specific point of view, and the work that you do is very singular to you specifically. And I think my question is, with influence being wrapped up in that I think in some way in that fear of doing your own thing because you are initially influenced by and look to other people. And like you had said earlier about being like, I'm never going to do something better than, you know, this guy or this woman. And, but how do you feel like you got to the point where you were able to embrace your point of view and really kind of showcase and not be afraid to show people like who you are
Okay.
individually?
I'd love to tell you I was from smoking a lot of dope. It probably was because it just made my, I don't advocate it now, one way or the other. Do what you want, but I think I lost a lot of fear. There's a few times I got the shit scared out of me too, but that's from probably a Colombian or something. I don't know. But I think by just accepting whatever came my way more and more and losing the fear, and somewhere along the line having some opportunities like, hey, why don't you have a show? Really? And so I'd have a lot of people, but it helped me along the way, Rena Branston being one of them. It gave me an opportunity where I had to say, okay, I'm going to have to do two things that I love, which is art and music, and I'm going to have to make some good stuff. So there was a big gap there, and all the time between not working and beginning to work again, which would be around 1974 or 5. I'd been thinking about what I would do when I got to that point. In terms of influence, I would say it's a very delicate balance between being intimidated by people you admire and being inspired by them. I eventually got to the latter and say, come on, man, get real. These people have been working for X amount of years, and if you look at their early work, it ain't great. Did you ever see an early Hopper? They're pretty awful. But kept working, and all of a sudden, same thing with Morandi. I mean, I don't like his early work so much. That end stuff, I never paid much attention to Manet until he was on his deathbed, and those paintings are unbelievably great. So you just figure you're going to get better if you keep putting in your time and you start recognizing things that you don't question. It's got to be legal, of course, but if you find something, appealing, don't question it, do something about it. Come back later, and say, pretty good, okay, build on that. So it's a step-by-step thing. And you always have to take the attitude that you are going to get better. The more you do it, and the more you love doing it. There's this whole three-party process. There's a book called The Gift. And I'm sure some of you have read it. And it's like, okay, you see something that somebody else did and it blows your mind, and you're moved. And maybe you're in this wabi-sabi. Oh my God, what's going on here? That kind of inspiration means you have to do it too. And after you do it, you teach it to somebody else. And that was one of the fortunate things I had about teaching. I'm very proud of the track record my students have, both professionally and in the teaching field. My job, you got to pass it on. There's no secret glaze formula. I'll tell you anything you want to know. It's what you do with what you got. And then they turn it around, and the whole process starts again. It's just getting rid of the fear and beating yourself up, and man, I'm an expert at that. But after a while, you get over it. Don't give up. Those who don't give up will do something,
Hi, I've been very inspired by your work, Ron Nagle, in my own art practice, and I'm also grateful for the last question that was just asked. And kind of going along with that fear, I want to ask a question about process. I'm curious, especially because a lot of your work is on such a small scale and has very organic forms. How many pieces don't make it and end up in the scrap pile? And also, are some pieces, this might be more information than you're willing to divulge, but
I'll tell you anything you want to know.
but do sometimes you find an element of one piece and you're like, well, I like this one element, but it doesn't work with the entire composition, and you put it on another one? And how has that become more deliberate over your career, if it even has? Do more pieces make it?
Okay, first of all, I'm pretty fortunate that I don't lose too many. Some are better than others. If I lose them, it's usually from, something blowing up in the kill or cracking or whatever. So I don't, I probably lose, well, I'll just say very, very few. In terms of taking element one and combining with element two, I mean, it's all intuitive. I have a whole lot of parts, or I start off drawing so I can eliminate a lot of the guesswork by drawing. I can sort of envision a flat drawing as a three-dimensional piece. Are you over there asking the question?
It's up there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're in the.
I'm sorry. Well, that's what
blind.
happens when it's dark in the room. You addressed the wrong person. I'm sorry, but it's okay. You can stand there. It's okay. Okay, so anyway, I will have combinations of riffs, what somebody would maybe call, or motifs, where I'll put one with the other, but I'm reluctant to say I do series. I may only do 3 or 4 of the same kind of thing. And if I start to repeat myself, it's just not any fun anymore, is really where it's at. It's just, once in a while I'll, check out a review or see what's on Instagram or something like that and say, oh, they like that, huh? I better make some more of those. Wrong. Can't do it because it's not fun anymore. Half the fun of it is the discovery of oh, you put that with that? I don't even get it. But that's a good thing. I'm trying to make enigmatic, hybrid stuff without, Jack Nietzsche told me a story about one time. He said, who scored a lot of great movies, and he said, look, if you got a scene and the guy's running, you don't play running songs. But I've seen it happen. I saw it in Forrest Gump. Every fucking time you'd see him, there must have been 20 running songs in there. He says, you got to come in sideways. You know what I'm talking about? So if you had a sad scene, maybe you'd have a, calliope playing. But that combined experience gives you another level of emotion that you're not going to get somewhere else. And I guess if I'm trying to do anything, it's to really confuse the public. If I was being negative, but I'm trying to put stuff together, not too consciously. I'll just know it when I see it. That's the beauty of music. Just go, hey, good chord. What's that? I don't know. What's the next one? And ask him. So, trust your intuition. That's all I can say. Doesn't mean it's going to be right all the time, but that's all right.
I noticed one of your pieces was a reference to Gouda. What is your relationship to cheese?
Well, that's getting pretty personal. Oh boy, yeah.
First of all, this is a good story, so you better not leave. Well, here I have. Remember this, Don?
That's it. The cheese
Okay,
tattoo.
Gouda.
The cheese now. The
It
Gouda.
says cheese now. Now here's what here's
In
what happens.
Chinese.
This is something that Scott and I share. It's part of our vocabulary, a vocabulary that one disgruntled Scientologist referred to as offensive code. Oh, offensive code, because we have invented our own language. I had two crazy dogs one time, and they loved to escape. And they'd run all over the neighborhood. And prior to that, I had another dog which got hit up on the hill in Bernal Heights and got killed. And it was horrible. But anyway, so I was afraid when the dogs, who let the dogs out deal. I couldn't get them in the car. I'd drive all over the neighborhood. And they wouldn't get in the car. But if I said cheese, I'd say, cheese, boys. Cheese, cheese for boys. I call them boys, they were dogs. Right in the car. So cheese meant the ultimate top of the line draw. And it also became a form of recognition and success. And cheese started taking on. We wrote a song about a guy that didn't get a gold watch called Cheese Now. When I retired from Mills, I didn't get any gold watch. I'm still bitter about it. I got a plastic one it's gold. Anyway, so cheese means anything. If you pulled up in front of a restaurant and you got a parking spot, people would say, oh, you got rock star parking. No, man, we got cheese parking. If you give somebody a compliment and say, man, you are the heaviest, I love your work, blah, 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 that means you're giving them cheese. Now, cheese, or the word cheddar, has become, in the hip-hop vernacular, for money, or I'm sure success. So there's lots of layers of cheese. I never thought I'd get a tattoo. Don gave me a tattoo. It's just a block of cheese, a wedge of cheese, and then underneath in Japanese it says now. And apparently the now I've got, there's many variations of it, means right fucking now. So it has to do with success. It has to do with adulation. It has to do with all kinds of things. But that's my, I'm not particular. I wouldn't know Gouda from Velveeta, really. But we wrote a song, Cheese Now. Do I have to die to get credit? I've paid too many dues to forget it. Cheese now. That's. Cheese is juxtaposed from bad rice. Yeah, well, somebody's got a bad rice record there. It's unbelievable. Oh my God.
Collectibles.
Collectibles now. Vinyl's back, and now it's gone, and now you have to phone it in or something. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to articulate this, but once Hardy told me how difficult it was to come up with a shape that was original.
Uh-huh.
And you seem to have a lot of original shapes. So where do
they come from?
Yeah.
Over here somewhere. I don't know, stuff I see. If you got like my book or, a splat on the street, it could be a ship. It could be, if it appeals to me and I recognize it as something that is beautiful, I guess, or appealing or whatever, I'll draw it out or take a picture of it and somehow might wind up as a piece. That there's no specific, a lot of stuff from nature. I love elephants. I got one here. I got some cheese here too, actually. But the elephant is my favorite animal, which kind of has the quality. I was talking to a friend who just got back from Africa. She said, you'd be amazed how light-footed and graceful these huge, bulky, beautiful animals. So you got that tooth, that and grace. I've got stuff from elephant ears, trunks. Mix that in with a splat of something on, it could be bird shit, I don't know. I've done things based on dog shit. Some people think it was dog shit. He took a mold. I don't know how he did it, but he got down there and that's not what I did. I just remembered it. And I forgot it, and I made a piece, and it's still around.
So with that, I also want to point out right before,
Yeah, with that shit.
if you look in the catalog at the very end, there is a section of sort of inspiration and images that come from Ron's phone. So they're random sources of inspiration. So if you want to see more of those kinds of shapes that he's talking about, you can check that out too. But I want to thank Don Ed Hardy and Ron Nagle very much for being with us today.
Thank you. And thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.